Risk planning. There are 8 steps. First, find applicable laws and regulations. Then find information government requirements. Step 3, build a risk profile. 4, perform a risk assessment. Then 5, develop a plan. 6, determine the metrics. 7, implement your plan. And then 8, audit your program. Let's look at step 1 a little closer. First, step 1, survey and determine legal and regulatory requirements. This is when you find the federal, state, and even municipal laws and regulations that might apply. You can look at laws applying to retention and privacy of information, for example. And if your organization operates in multiple jurisdictions, multiple states, countries, there may be overlapping laws and regulations. And each organization needs to do their own research. Each organization is responsible for complying with the laws. So legal research is required before determining and implementing retention periods, privacy policies, security measurements. And there's an approach to this called a record retention citation services, which publishes certain laws and requirements relating to things like record retention. Now, there are laws related to the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. There's employment laws, such as the Fair Labor Standard Act. There's HIPAA laws, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. There are Employment Retirement and Income Security Act laws and regulations. There's OSHA laws, Occupational Safety and Health Administration laws. Then there's numerous state and local government laws. For example, you will learn that some documents, if we talk about document retention, some documents should be kept for 1 year, like purchase orders and requisitions. Other documents might need to be kept for 3 years, like personnel records and time cards. Others for 7 years, bank statements and payroll records. And documents may need to be kept indefinitely, like tax returns, financial statements, and property records. So as you develop risk planning, you may need to take note of things like this and start including them in the plan that you're developing. Now, in addition to these regulatory and legal aspects, there are your internal aspects, and this is your information governance requirements. So this can be different from the legally mandated minimums. So your organization might not even be in a highly regulated industry, but you may have a lot of internal information government policies and procedures. So you also need to identify these. So if we continue with the example of document retention, you may want to keep email for 90 days or a year, and these might be internal policies and procedures. You may also have a last accessed rationale. So if something hasn't been last accessed for over a year or 3 years, maybe then it could be discarded. So in addition to regulations by the federal government, state government, or your municipality, you may have internal policies and procedures falling under information governance that you need to be aware of. So there's different kind of risk profile methodologies. Some are called the top 10 list, a risk map, or a heat map. A top 10 list is a way to rank the 10 greatest risks for an organization. The risk map is a visual tool with a grid depicting a likelihood axis and an impact axis, usually on a scale of 1 to 5. And a heat map is a color-coded matrix generated by stakeholders voting on a risk level color. For example, maybe red is the highest and green is the lowest. Let's take a little closer at a risk heat map.
Hi, I'm Tony from Inconsult and welcome to 1 Minute Risk Manager. Today I'm going to talk to you about the risk heat map, what it means and how to use it to help you manage risks. Most risks can be measured by simply considering two things. One, the likelihood of the risk occurring, and two, the consequences of the risk should it occur. When you combine these two factors, you can plot them on a two-axis grid, most commonly referred to as a heat map. The heat map plots the likelihood on one axis and the consequence on the other. The risk rating is where the 2 points meet. The heat map is a good visualisation of risks, allowing you to see the big picture. It can be a 3x3 grid, a 5x5 grid, or another variation. The most popular heat map is a 5x5 grid. A 5x5 heat map grid is divided into 25 cells, each representing different levels of risk. It's common to translate these 25 cells into 4 or 5 colours, where each colour means something. For example, red is often used for extreme risk and green is used for low risk. The heat map can also show you risks in different dimensions. Inherent risk and residual risk levels for a particular point in time, the range of risks in an area, say finance, the top 10 risks for the whole organisation, the cluster of risks by risk category or risk area. The heat map is a simple way to represent risks in a visual way. The better the quality of your risk assessment, then the better the quality of the information on your risk heat map. Thank you for watching 1 Minute Risk Manager. If you think managing risk is too hard, think again. Find out more at inconsult.com.au.
Step 4 is performing a risk assessment. And to do this, you first identify the risks, and this is the result of creating the risk profile. Then determine the potential impact, hopefully in a quantitative sense. How many dollars could it cost if one of the risks happened? Be as specific as possible. If something bad did happen, what could happen? Could it cause a business objective to fail? What could a negative event do to the organization? And then evaluate the risk levels and probabilities and recommend an action. It may be in the form of recommending a new policy or a new process, maybe new investments in information technology or some other action to mitigate the risk. And then create a report, write it down, document it, make recommendations, and then implement it. And then review it annually. Periodically review it, audit it as appropriate for the organization. Make it a living document. Here's another perspective on the risk assessment.
Hi, I'm Tony from Inconsult and welcome to 1 Minute Risk Manager. Today I'm going to talk to you about assessing risks and interest rate increases. When we hear the news about another potential interest rate increase, different people will view the level of risk of this one event differently. If you're an investor, it's an opportunity. It will mean an increase in investment income. If you rent, have a small mortgage or no mortgage, the risk and impact is minimal. If you have a large mortgage or about to take on a mortgage, the news will increase your financial risk, as it will mean higher mortgage repayments and less money in your pocket. So the same event could have different effects. The risk assessment answers the question, how large or small is the risk? Let's think about this for a minute. One of the objectives of the risk assessment is to calculate the level of risk. Is it high, medium or low? When you assess risks, there are 5 things you need to think about. 1. The potential cause. How could the risk occur and how many ways could it happen? The more potential causes, the higher the likelihood and risk. 2. The likelihood. This is the chance of the risk occurring. Consider previous events and the control environment. 3. The potential impact or consequence of the risk. Consider what it will mean to you, the organisation and stakeholders. 4. The adequacy of controls. Are the controls currently in place to manage the risks adequate? 5. Think about Plan B. Even with all these controls in place, what can you do if the risk occurs? So, when you're doing a risk assessment, there are a number of things you need to think about. Take time to think through the various elements of the risks. Let me assure you, it is time well spent. Thank you for watching 1 Minute Risk Manager. If you think managing risk is too hard, think again. Find out more at inconsult.com.au.
Step 5 is writing the plan. This goes right along with the risk assessment. You need to develop the options and tasks to reduce the specific risks and improve the odds of achieving the business objectives. So you're putting that plan in writing. Take all the information you've collected and analyzed in the risk profile, risk assessment, and put it down in writing. The information, the risk mitigation plan should include a timetable and milestones for implementation of the risk mitigation measures. Include anything related to acquisition of IT resources, analyze roles, responsibilities, and make sure you get an executive sponsor. Get stakeholders involved and get all levels of the organization involved. Assigning some qualitative measures that are meaningful and measure progress is challenging, but this will help you see progress. And metrics help justify investment in this information governance risk analysis plan. Here's some examples of some metrics, and make sure those metrics are numerical as much as possible. Reduce the number of hacker intrusion events by 75% over last year. Provide information risk training to 100% of the knowledge level workers this fiscal year. Provide confidential messaging service for 20 top executives this fiscal year. Now we have our risk mitigation plan. We've developed the metrics. Now we need to implement that plan. Set up regular meetings, develop our progress points, check our milestones, develop the key reports, manage the progress, see how we're doing. Use software management tools. Use management software, even social media. Use email. Implement the plan. And then finally, audit the program. See how we did and see the opportunities for improvement. Check the metrics that we developed. Use those for auditing purposes. Put a process in place to separately and independently audit the risk mitigation measures. Make sure they were implemented. The result of the audit should be a useful input in improving and fine-tuning the program. It's not an opportunity to see what went wrong. It's a way to periodically and regularly feedback the loop into the information government program.